I think that was amazing. Can you explain that last sentence? Wow. Because I had the subjectivity when you live your life conforming to other people's expectations or desires or enforcement, the mores, the rules. I had a moment where my brain just made an explosion. Do you see yourself being repressed, or the false self totally takes over? Our friend Sam Vaknin says that in the case of the narcissist, the false self took over. And there isn't really a normal self anymore. Or if there is, it's so primitive and so weak and so frail that really and truly there isn't much you can do with it because it's very undeveloped. But let's say on the case of a normal person, intersubjectivity implies the gaze of others, correct? So when you live your life based on the gaze of others, you only have intersubjectivity, but you don't have your own subjectivity. You don't have your own subjective perspective about life. Is that what you were saying?
I mean that the subjectivity versus objectivity. Objectivity is a passive word in Lacan theory. Subjectivity is an active word, an active language, because when you can have your own word from your subjective position of your mind, your interpsychic, is when you have all of your desire in your hands.
Yes.
This is what I mean. Objectivity in Lacan theory is referred to a passive word. Still, you have other confirmations, the big other confirmations. What Kohut called mirror-hungry personality disorder. You can find shared elements between Kohut, Lacan, Winnicott. They're all trying to say the same things.
But Lacan uses such cryptic language. Sometimes it drives me mad. For example, when he talks about the imaginary, I thought initially he was talking about imagination. But then I realized, no, he's talking mostly about image. So imaginary in the sense of image-based. For example, the child looking in the mirror belongs to the imaginary, to the small other, to the image. And I'm like, Lacan, why did you use the word imaginary? You should have used the word imagetic. But no, he had to use the word imaginary, which makes us think of imagination. But then he will say, no, it's not imagination, it's image. Maybe Lacan is also a surrealist. Maybe he's also an artist. Why do you think Lacan was deliberately rejecting very logical language? Why was he rejecting language that is easy to understand? Apparently, he did it on purpose. Now, I know that Noam Chomsky, by the way, I love Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky believes that Lacan was a charlatan. And Noam Chomsky actually said that Lacan knew that he was a charlatan and he was really enjoying it. So this is Noam Chomsky's perspective coming from another linguist, because I think Lacan was also partially a linguist at least, and he was very inspired by Saussure, who was a linguist as well. So it seems like psychoanalysis connects a lot with linguistics. But let's assume for a moment that Lacan was not a charlatan. Let's assume that it's a really valid psychoanalyst model, which perhaps it is. I would like to ask you, why did he reject the very rational, the very simple? Because in good science, you always try to simplify as much as you can. The rules of physics tend to be incredibly, elegantly minimal. If something is very complicated, usually it means that we didn't understand what we were talking about. It seems like the rules of the universe tend towards simplicity more than towards confusion. Do you think the Lacanian confusion serves a purpose? Do you think it is useful to have a cryptic language?
Yes, exactly. I think that as most thinker in psychoanalysis, Lacan was genuine, the same as Freud.
Oh, wow.
And this complexity and difficulty in the Lacan language refer, I think, to two things. One is the audience of the Lacan theory of the psychoanalysis experts. The language must be at the high level of the scientific and maybe more and far from the scientific languages. And the second reason is that all of the story of the psychoanalysis is interpretations, interpretation of dreams, interpretation of transference, countertransference, resistance, interpretation of free association. All Lacan theory is about the psychoanalysis. So the core element is interpretation. So his language needs interpretation too, because he's a psychoanalyst. And you have to interpret his language. This is why Lacan called it genuine.
So you think Lacan was also a surrealist and a Dadaist?
Exactly. It's far from the realistic languages, so he's a surrealist.
So he's also an artist up to a point.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing.
Really was a genuine. I respect to the Lacan theories and all of the Lacanian psychoanalysts. Yes, they have their own language that needs interpretation. This is the story of psychoanalysis. When someone faced with a psychoanalyst, he or she has to try to interpret what is he or she saying. This is the position of psychoanalysis, because the core concept of psychoanalysis is about symbols, and symbols need interpretations.
Yes.
So there are the core concepts of the languages of psychoanalysis. Lacan has his own difficult language that needs interpretation.
If you tell me that Lacan was also an artist, then suddenly I think I understand his writing style. If you tell me Lacan was a scientist, then I don't like it at all, because I think it's obscure, horrible, But if you tell me that he is a surrealist, now I feel like rereading Lacan again with a very different perspective.